Hello, it's Grandma Karen. I hope you enjoyed sewing in our last lesson. Today we will practice on 2 more practice sheets. The video will be a little longer than usual. We will sew without thread and learn to sew curves and learn more about stitch length. I will open up a sewing machine so you can see what happens inside the machine when you sew. In this video we will be talking about the Bernina 335. When I show you the inside of the machine, I will talk about the take-up lever. Every machine has a take-up lever. It goes up and down when you sew and pulls the thread off the spool. Here's the take-up lever right here. I'll show you how it works in a minute. The photo on the left shows the take-up lever at its highest position, the place it needs to be to start and stop a stitch. The photo on the right shows the take-up lever lowered in the middle of a stitch. Your machine has what is called needle stop up. Every time you stop sewing, it will put the needle and the take-up lever in the up position to its highest position. The highest position is also the start of a stitch. If you use the hand wheel to do the last few stitches of sewing, you will need to use the hand wheel to put the take-up lever and the needle in the up position before sewing again. Your machine also has what is called needle stop down. This button right here allows you to have the needle stop in the down position in the fabric. This is helpful when you're doing a lot of pivoting or sewing circles. Here's a close-up of the needle stop down button. Push the button and the needle will go into the fabric. If you hold the button down for a few seconds, it will change to always stop with the needle down. Needle stop down means that anytime you stop sewing, the needle will stop in the down position. It will be stuck in the fabric. The yellow arrow on the display screen shows a picture of a point of a needle. Next to it is an up caret. Push the needle stop down button and the caret points down. To put the needle back to stopping in the up position, push the needle stop down button again. The arrow will now point up. When you turn your machine on, it will always be in the needle stop up position. This is the knee lifter or the knee lever. Bernina calls it the free hand system or the FHS. It plugs into this little slot right here on your machine. I have plugged the knee lifter into the machine. I usually use the presser foot lifter like this to raise and lower my presser foot. I'll put my hands down now so you can see that I can lift this presser foot by pushing on the knee lever. It is dropping the feed dog, and this works well when you're doing a lot of pivoting or stopping and starting. The presser foot is in the up position as long as I am pushing my knee against the lever. When I stop pushing, the presser foot will go down and the feed dog will come back up. Try to release this knee lever gradually so the presser foot goes down gently. If you're very short or not very strong, this may be awkward for you and you may not be able to use it. You can try the knee lifter on our second practice sheet today. To put the knee lifter into the slot, tilt the knee lifter to the right a little bit, and then you might have to wiggle around a little bit till you get in, and you need to push it in all the way. Sometimes it sticks a little bit, and then it will work. Then to pull it out, just pull out. Sometimes you have to push real hard or pull real hard to get it in and out, but it works. It should work really well. Now it's time to pause the video and get ready to sew on paper. When you're ready, I will demonstrate sewing on the 2 practice papers. You can watch the demonstrations and then sew your practice sheets, or you can watch one demonstration, stop and sew, and then do the same for the second demonstration. The link to the practice sheets is under the video. This is practice sheet number 1. There are 4 gentle curved lines on the right, and the far left there is a deeper curve. So as we start, we're going to start at the top, and again we're using this slit or groove in your presser foot as our guide, and we're just going to go slowly and try to go along here. And I'm kind of swiveling or tilting or swirling, spinning this a little bit as I go, so it's not going straight back now. We're I want you to speed up a little bit and see if it's easier, if it's easier to go slow or can you go fast. On this one, I can kind of go fast, but you might not be able to. Remember that we're just doing gentle steering. And you can see right here where I went off the line a little bit. That's where I was going fast. You can turn it over and look on this side too. And see right here I went off the line a little bit. Now I would like you to practice these other lines right here if you feel like you need to. And I'm going to start doing this deeper, harder curve now. And I have to pull my fabric up, my paper up right there. And I'm going to go, and as I go on this one, I may have to every once in a while stop, put my needle down and pivot a little bit. So sometimes on really deep curves, we actually have to pivot. So I'm doing this, I'm kind of like spinning it a little bit as it's going. And then if I get off a little bit, then put my needle down, my presser foot up, and pivot it a little bit, and that's pretty normal. Now this is going to be harder for you to do, and you don't need to have it perfect. This is just for you to learn how to maneuver your machine using this guiding hand and my steering hand. And actually both hands are steering, but I'm mainly making sure that my paper isn't running into this and keeping me from going. And then you're just going to go all the way to the end. I'm going to try to go a little bit faster. And you can try going faster and slower and see how much control you have when you're going faster or slower. And I'm not staying on the line very well because I'm going too fast. And just a reminder, as you get to the end, if you're using your hand wheel, or if you do not have needle stop up, then as I do these last couple stitches, remember that you need to park your needle all the way at the top before you take it out. Let's turn it over and see how well I did. Not too bad. And yours won't be perfect. You don't need to worry about that. So this right here is your feed dog. Usually you can only see the top of them. When you put fabric in there and your presser foot is pressing down on here, what happens is this feed dog grabs a hold of the fabric and then it pulls it back, and then the feed dog drops and it comes back up a little bit farther down, and it goes, and that's how it pushes the fabric through. So let's take a look at what happens when this feed dog is on a 4 or a long stitch. So watch what happens to the feed dog. You see how it's going down and it's going back, and then as it does its stitch, it goes up, grabs the fabric, goes back, then drops down and comes forward. And these are long stitches, and see how much this is moving. Now I'm going to change the sewing machine to shorter stitches, and we'll see what the difference is. All right, now let's see what's happening when we're doing a shorter stitch. It's almost like it's not even moving back at all, but it is moving a teeny bit. So it's only moving the fabric a tiny bit. When it does those longer stitches, it is moving the fabric back a lot more. And that's what the stitch length does. So now we're going to look at how this take-up lever, the needle, and the feed dog all work together to form the stitches. It also uses the bobbin, but we're going to talk about that in another lesson. So this take-up lever is going to go down and back up, and it's what helps pull the thread off of the spool. Then it's going to go into the needle, and as it forms the stitches, let's watch and see what happens to the take-up lever. So see how that goes? And then I want you to listen as I stop. You're going to hear a little click as I stop. Did you hear that little click at the end? That's my machine doing the needle stop up. Your machine may not have that, but if it does, then every time you stop with your foot control, it will stop in the up position. Also, the needle stopped in the up position. So now this time let's look at the needle when I do the needle stop up. There's my needle going, and see, my needle stopped at the top position. So anytime you sew, you want to stop with this at the top and this at the top, And if you don't have needle stop up, you're going to need to do that with your hand wheel. Turn your hand wheel towards you so that it's ready for the start of a stitch. This is where it is when it has the start of the stitch. And let's look now at what happens when we put our needle down. I'm going to use my hand wheel and I'm going to put that needle down. And as my needle is going down in, here is my take-up lever. It's going down also. If you don't have needle stop up, then what happens is you stop stitching. It may be that your needle's there and your take-up lever's there. It may be that your needle is here and your take-up lever is here. See how those all work together? What happens is if I stop stitching and my take-up lever is right there and my needle is there, as my take-up lever comes up, it's going to unthread your needle. And we'll talk about this more when we do threading, our threading lesson. But I just want you to be aware that anytime you use your hand wheel, or if you do not have needle stop up, then you need to always park your take-up lever and your needle at the highest position, which is the beginning of a stitch. Before we start our next worksheet, let's review stitch lengths. Look at this chart and you can see that there are European measurements and the way that the US older machines measure their stitches. Europeans measure their stitches in millimeters, and the United States old method measured in stitches per inch, or SPI. If you look at the chart, you can see that there are settings for normal stitches. If you have a computerized machine, it will automatically turn on to this 2.4 or 10 to 12. The table also lists the settings for long stitches, which we call basting stitches or temporary stitches. It also has short stitches, which we use with a buttonhole and for doing some kinds of zigzag and decorative stitches. This is practice sheet 5-2. We're going to sew on the straight lines and then on the spiral. Okay, so notice that there are 3 lines right here, and what we're going to do is we're going to practice changing our stitch length and see how stitch length affects our sewing on curves. So this first one, it says to change your stitch length to a 4 millimeter, or if you have the old American system, change it to about 6 to 8 stitches per inch. So I'm going to change mine. So I'm making these stitches longer, and I'm going to start at the top of this line, and I'm just going to sew. Then you're going to go to the top of the next line, and this one you're going to sew a normal stitch length, which is 2.5 millimeters or about 2.4 some machines, or 10 to 12 stitches. And so I'm going to, on my machine, because it's computerized, I can just push the clear button and it will take my stitches back to 2.4. And we're going to sew on that line. And then for this next one, we're going to try to do some really small stitches. If you make them too small, then it's actually going to cut holes in your paper. But I want you to do about 1.5 stitch length, or for the old system, it'll be about 16 to 18 stitches per inch. So if you do it too tiny, it's going to cut the fabric. But we're going to do this one now. And when you're done, I want you to turn your paper over and I want you to look at these stitches. So this first stitch right here that you did was very long, and you can see how much space there is between the stitches. This is a normal stitch. There's less space. And this is the very small stitch. You can see how close those stitches are to each other. So this is what stitch length is. Now let's turn our paper back over, and we're going to start doing this spiral. I want you to go back to normal stitch length, which is 2.4, 2.5, or 10 to 12 stitches per inch. So I'm going to push my clear button because I have a computerized machine, and I'm going to start sewing. And I want you to sew around this curve. And this is a little bit different than the curves we did on our last worksheet. And you can see how my guiding hand is kind of like spinning or swirling this. And I want you to sew to about the top. Try going fast, try going slow, see how things go. And then once you get around the top of this curve, I want you to stop and I want you to put it on a long stitch length. I've put mine at 4 millimeters, and for yours it may also be a 6 to 10 stitches per inch. So I'm gonna sew along here, and you can see that it's a little bit harder for me to stay on the curve with these long stitches. I can't really go very fast, so if I try going fast, it's a little bit harder for me to maneuver this and stay on the line. And after sewing for a little while, let's switch to smaller stitches. So I'm going to go back down to a 1.5 on my machine, and on your machine it may be like 16 to 18 stitches per inch. And you'll see that I can go a little bit faster with my stitches as smaller. So there are times when, if we're sewing big curves, we might want to stitch with a smaller stitch length. But the drawback of small stitches is if you have to undo these stitches, take these stitches out because you've made a mistake, then it's harder to take the stitches out. So we try to keep it at our normal stitch length. But I just wanted you to make sure that you understood what stitch length was, because there are times when we are going to have to change them. So my question for you is it easier to stitch this deep curve with a longer stitch or a shorter stitch or a normal stitch? So there's a couple more things that I wanted to talk to you about when we're doing curves. So one thing is, my machine has needle stop down, and your machine may not have this, but if it does, you can see that as I'm going, my needle is stopping in the down position, down in the paper. And it's a little bit easier to do the pivoting. Sometimes when I'm doing curves, I have to stop and pivot a little bit because I start getting off the line, and having that down there works really well. The other thing is, if you have a knee bar that does the freehand system where it actually puts your presser foot up and down, this is another good time to use that system. I hope that was fun. Curves are not easy. You will improve with time and with practice. It is time for your homework. You can take a photo of the homework or just pause the video. Tell your mentor, teacher, or relative the following things. 1. Point to the take-up lever. Use your hand wheel to make it go to the highest position and to the lowest position. 2. Show how you can make the needle stop down and how to put it back to needle stop up. 3. What are 2 ways to be more accurate when sewing curves? 4. Show how to make longer stitches. Show how to make shorter stitches. What is the stitch length number for your machine when you're doing normal sewing? 5. Show how to use the knee lifter. 6. Sew the 2 practice sheets if you already haven't. You had some good practice today and learned a little more about your machine. Your sewing machine guidebook and your mentor can help you remember what you learned today. In our next lesson, we will learn about a thing called tension. We need to understand tension before we learn to wind a bobbin and put thread on your machine. See you next time. And here's a note to the mentor. Keep reminding your student to use their hands correctly. Their sewing will not be perfect. The object of the lesson is to see what their machine will let them do and a few ways to use the features they have on their machine. There is nothing you need to do to get ready for next lesson. We will be talking about tension in preparation for learning to wind the bobbin. Thank you for helping someone learn to sew.